Good evening. I'd like to call to order the June 24th, 2019 Lake Washington School Board meeting. So please let the record reflect that all board members are present. I would now like to entertain a motion to approve the June 24th agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director La Liberty that we approve the agenda. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. And so tonight we will be beginning with recognitions. So Dr. Staven, will you start that process?
I will do that, and I'm going to ask Matt Gillingham to come up. Tonight we are going to recognize district champions, and we're going to work on this for next year. There's just so many kids who do so many great things, and there's clubs, there's organizations. So for our first pass at this tonight, we are recognizing champions as recognized by WIAA, which is the Athletics and Activities Association for Washington. And we have students who were almost champions and champions tonight as champions, but we certainly want to say congratulations to all of our teams and our activities. And we know that kids being involved in athletics and activities is something that truly makes a difference in their connection to school, in their engagement, in their relationships, and in just being part of a team, and that's a really important thing. So we appreciate the work that's gone into making sure we have quality activities and athletics and things for kids to do. So let's go through our champions.
All right, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be able to recognize we have 10 groups or individuals that received state WIA championships, either in athletics or activities or academics. So I'm going to quickly run through each of those 10 and acknowledge their successful journey this year. We have the Eastlake girls soccer team was the 4A academic state champions. We have a couple of academic state champions, and that means that they had the highest GPA as a team of any team in the state. The Eastlake girls basketball won the 4A state championship. We have two dance teams that won state championships. The first is the Eastlake Dance and Drill, and they won for the POM competition. And the Lake Washington Dance and Drill team has won the 3A for military. Jillian Jackson from Eastlake was the 4A forensic state champion. Zephyr Tao, Ashley Chiu, Meghna Shankar, and Mira Roth from Redmond High School were state champions for the small string ensemble. The Redmond Fast Pitch team last year were state champions on the field, and this year they were state champions academically for 4A. The Redmond's girls golf team also won the 4A state championship. And Bowman Starr from Eastlake was the 4A pole vault state champion. And finally, the Lake Washington baseball team was the 3A state champions this year. So it's an honor to be able to recognize them. As Dr. Staven mentioned, we have quite a few individuals and teams who represent our school district very well, both in state champions as well as throughout their competitions throughout the year. So it's a pleasure to be able to recognize them here, and we're going to continue to work on ways that we can continue to recognize them in the school district. Thank you.
I would like to just add something. As a new superintendent, as I went to lots of activities and athletics this year, I was so impressed by our student body. And they were there supporting their fellow classmates, and it was everything from a play to a volleyball game to a football game and everything in between, and kids doing a really nice job of representing our district, which is a big part of how they connect, even if they're not on the field or on the court or on stage. And so that was really impressive to see. So great student participation overall. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda tonight is public comment. And so we do have some individuals signed up. I'd just like to do a quick overview. Value engaging with the community and hearing directly from the public, and there are multiple ways to share your comments, tonight being just one of those. You can also email, you can call. And so please note that this is not a question and answer session with the board. The board and superintendent will not respond to your comments during public comment. Our goal is to listen and to learn from you. We allow up to 3 minutes for each speaker. There is a yellow, red, and light green. I'm going in the backwards order, so green, red, yellow. I can't even do them in the right order anymore. It's been a long day. You're given 3 minutes. You'll see yellow when you have 1 minute left. When red happens, please wrap up your comments. I would appreciate that greatly. So when your name is called, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone to give your full name and the school attendance area for the record, and that will be it. So our first person we have signed up to address the board is Rolf Nelson.
Hello, Rolf Nelson. I'm a parent in the Redmond High School feeder pattern. I'm here tonight because I received no reply to my email to all of you about a very problematic lesson delivered to my son's science class this year. The difference between yeah, right, and yeah, right is one of tone and context. Same words, opposite meaning. During an otherwise reasonable lesson on renewable energy and carbon footprints, the teacher had a segment about privilege, complete with pie charts to fill out where all around could see them. The connection to energy and carbon footprint was muddled at best. The definition of privilege was absent. My son couldn't really figure out the point was. As near as I can tell from the context, the inference was that privilege equated to energy use, and the greater your energy use, the more you were a bad person killing the planet with your evil CO2 emissions. Being white earned him a shaded piece of the privilege pie. Being white was associated with being anti-environment and bad for the planet. Being male, straight, or Christian each earned another shaded piece of the privilege pie. His chart was almost completely covered for anyone around him to see. The possibility that he might be shamed or made to feel guilty about being so hyper-privileged seems to have not crossed anyone's mind. At least, I hope it wasn't intentional. The possibility of anyone around him seeing his chart, comparing it to their own, and feeling resentful or envious seemed to have been likewise overlooked. The obvious political partisanship cannot be missed. Given the connotation and implied sneering, you are privileged, so you are causing a problem for our planet, the word privilege was clearly being used as a pejorative. You cannot build empathy and unity during Empathy Week by stoking resentment, division, guilt, or envy. Privilege is an ambiguous word. Being underprivileged is considered a problem, and that's the context that most kids hear it in. We have a lot of programs to help underprivileged kids. So clearly, lack of it is bad, but just like the phrase, yeah, right. Context and meaning can make it mean the opposite. There is not a single government program for someone afflicted with a deficit of whiteness or Christianity. On the other hand, there are a lot of very clear policies about making broad pejorative comments about a group with regard to sex, faith, race, or orientation. That's called stereotyping. I am quite certain that the district strictly prohibits derogatory or negative stereotyping about a person or group based upon their race, sex, creed, orientation, etc. Intent means much less than the perception of those listening. To have a lesson that, in the name of diversity and inclusion, sets about excluding, denigrating, and dividing by identity group stereotypes is positively Orwellian in its doublespeak, and Kafkaesque to boot. But that is the inescapable inference from the lesson. Orwell's lesson about doublethink in 1984 was meant as a warning, not a guidebook. I look forward to a detailed response to my email.
And the next person we have signed up is Vicki McCarter.
Good evening. My name is Vicki McCarter. I'm an employee of the district. I'm here today to stand in support of my ESP colleagues. I've been in the district for over 20 years, and as an LWEA member, I've seen numerous collaborative, successful LWEA bargains. I've even had the privilege of participating in one as a bargaining team member. During that process, I felt it was a very interest-based and respectful time. I was treated with dignity, and I can recall even in the toughest financial times, the LWA bargains coming out with some kind of a positive. I've also seen during this same time my ESP colleagues experience the exact opposite over and over again. I don't see them treated with respect or with dignity. They are treated as second class. Can I go lower? They're treated as third class citizens. These are no longer bored housewives out looking for something to do during the day. These are educated, intelligent, dedicated employees. If the teachers and the administrators are the heart and the lungs and the bones and the muscles of this organization, our ESP members are the lifeblood. And without them, we don't accomplish anything. McCleary sent money to be used to increase the salaries of all district employees. The teachers got a wonderful raise last spring. I believe the administrators and even our prof techs got sizable raises. We've all benefited from those raises for the past year. ESP members last spring were told, you're going to have to wait. So they haven't experienced that this year. And now as they start their bargaining process, I feel like they're again being told to wait. I'm disappointed, I'm embarrassed as an LWSD employee to see my colleagues treated this disrespectfully. I would ask the board, equity is what we're talking about these days. I would ask the board to be equitable in your treatment of all your employees. Please do the right thing. Please stay at the bargaining table as we move into summer. And please share the McCleary money equitably with all of your employees. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person we have signed up is Kathy Weiss.
I just want to start by saying thank you, Vicki. Where did you go? Thank you very much for your kind words. We appreciate it greatly. Okay. Good evening, Dr. Stavum, board members, and Ms. Jenkins. It's great to be here in front of you. I'm learning a lot about the board and what you all do and the great job that you do, and we're very thankful for each and every one of you. Tonight, we just come with goodies for you and some important information we just wanted to share. I'm going to call it summer reading, as we do with our kids at our school. Just to introduce myself, I'm sorry, I'm a little quick here on the words, but my name is Kathy Weiss, as you mentioned. I am a former parent. My daughters, I have twin daughters that graduated from Redmond High School, went on to college, and are out in the working world and doing great. Thanks to all of us in this room and many other people. I live just up the hill in Redmond, and I'm lucky to be a register at Audubon Elementary, which I love doing. So just as I mentioned, we just have some little goodie bags for you guys to enjoy this summer. And we have some, of course, goes with it some important business information. So we have lots of facts that we've gathered, some really important data, and we would love for you guys to enjoy your goodie bags and read this, okay? And just learn a little bit more about what we do and just some important things that we'd like to share with you, okay? But again, thank you for everything that you do, okay? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who didn't get a chance to sign up for public comment who would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one, I will go ahead and close our time for public comment. Thank you. And so now we will move on to the consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson. Dr. Stavum, would you kindly poll the board?
Yes, Cassandra.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Siri.
Yes. And could you please review the donations?
Yes, our donations for this meeting are in the amount of $245,514.42 from PTSA and $1,280 from private sources, for a grand total of donations in the amount of $246,794.42.
Thank you. And thank you again to our community for that support. That'll be highly beneficial for our kids going forward. And I think Lakeview will be very happy with their playground equipment that was listed there. So that's an exciting addition. So our next step is the first reading for the budget. And so Jane, will you please introduce that?
I will, and before we begin with the budget, I noticed that Barbara Posthumous has a guest here tonight, and I would love it if you would start by introducing your guest to the board and to the public tonight.
Sorry, I want to introduce Chris Brannigan. Chris, raise your hand. Chris will be joining the district officially on July 1st as our Director of Business Services, and we are so excited to have him. Chris brings over 17 years experience in the school finance, so we're looking forward to that. So he is here tonight to learn more about the Lake Washington School District budget specifically, and join us for this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and this mic is in a weird. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Diane, are you all right? All right, thank you, everyone. So I'm pleased to present our proposed budget tonight to the board. And I just want to remind you of the documents that we have for our budget document. We have the official state format budget document, which is called the F-195. So that is the same format that every school district across the state is required to use. So we have that format. And that's the official budget that will be adopted in August. And then we have what we call our community user-friendly district budget document. This is our award-winning document that we received the Meritorious Budget Award for, and that is really helps our community be more informed about what makes up and what pieces go into our budget. So those are the two documents that you have. And so I'll be giving you highlights of our budget throughout this presentation. But again, any member of the public can get more information by going on our website after the budget. So this is the first year of, the good news about this budget is it's the first year of a biennial budget, and the legislature ended on time this year. So we were able to produce a complete draft document for the budget. So we'll just talk about what I'm about to present tonight. We'll go over our budget policies, process, and timeline. We'll go through all our funds. We'll focus a lot on our general fund revenue and expenditures, and then talk about our strategic work and resource alignment, and then go over next steps with the budget. So the next few slides are really covering the processes, the procedures that we follow that make up our that drive our budget development work. Our annual budget provides for staff participation, and we share recommendations with the board, and we share recommendations with our community prior to acting on the budget. And as a district, we solicit input from all our departments and program managers, and we also solicit requests from staff on budget. And then those requests are taken to our district leadership representative team of our district administrators, and then our recommendations are made to the superintendent, and those recommendations are then shared with the board, and we shared those recommendations with the board at our June 10th study session. So, and then we have, the board has an annual budget hearing, and that will occur in August. And then the board is required to adopt the budget no later than August 31st, and so we will do that on August 24th this year. And then I won't read all of these, but this, our executive EL10 describes the executive limitation relating to the budget. It is in a summary format, understandable to the board and community, which is the document that I talked about that we reduce, and it shows the relationship between the budget and our priorities. And then we also, part of the executive limitations is that the budget is, our expenditures are conservatively projected based on, and the funds that we have available are conservatively projected. So you will hear me use the word conservatively a couple times through this conversation. So let's see, won't go over that. So the timeline, tonight I am providing the presentation. The budget document is on our district website. If anybody in the community would like a hard copy, they can contact the budget office and get a hard copy of the budget document. Our public comment period will be starting June 25th through August 11th. On August 12th, we will have a public hearing, and then on August 26th, we will have formal board action on the budget. So now I'll go into the overview of the budget, and we'll go through all of the funds. There are 5 funds in the school districts manage. The first fund is the general fund budget, and the budget is $466 million. And the general fund is really our day-to-day operations. That's where staff salary and benefits, supplies and materials, textbooks, heat, lights, and utilities are charged. The Associated Student Body Fund is our student extracurricular activities for each of our schools. Those budgets are developed by each individual school, and they develop their own budget plan. That's $5.6 million. Our debt service fund of $83 million, that pays for the redemption of interest and principal on our voted bonds. And then our capital projects funds of $196 million includes our construction bonds, our capital and technology levies, and our latest April 2019 capacity levy and for safety. And then our transportation vehicle fund of $2 million provides for the purchase of our school buses. So first I'll review the other detail on each of the funds, and then I'll go into more detail on the general fund. So as I mentioned, at the ASB budget, each school develops their own budget. We are planning a beginning fund balance in this fund of about $981,000 and a $5.4 million in revenues, and those revenues comes from fundraisers, sales, sports activities, and then the expenditures of $5.5 million through general student body activities, athletics, classes and clubs, and then fundraisers. And so ending fund balance similar, about $823,000 in that budget. So our debt service fund, which as I mentioned, pays for the redemption and principal on bonds. We are expecting a beginning fund balance of $31.1 million. Our revenues come from levy and interest, and it also includes $2 million in a federal interest payment for bonds, and that will continue through 2025, and then we'll receive about half that for the next 3 years. We can only levy the amount that we need to pay off our principal and bonds, and we can't use the levy revenues for other things. So our expenditures include $83 million of expenditures. We do have contingency in this budget for a potential LGO, which is limited general obligation bond sale, if we determine the need to front fund some of our 6-year levy dollars. We will be working over the next 6 months to determine if that's needed, and if so, we have provided the contingency in this budget to do that. So ending fund balance in this budget of about $23 million. So the capital projects fund, We're expecting a beginning fund balance of $109 million. The revenue comes from our two levies, our 4-year capital facility and technology levy that was renewed in 2018, and then our 6-year capital levy for capacity and safety projects that was approved April of 2019. We also receive interest and impact fees in this fund, and then our state construction assistance. And those revenues of $5 million are the first part of our expected state construction assistance funds for Kirk, Meade, and Juanita High School through as part of our 2016 bond projects. And the remaining of those construction assistance funds will come in the next year. So the other finance sources of $70 million includes anticipated funds from sale of property, and then also, as I mentioned, the potential revenue from a limited general obligation bond sale should we need it. And then so the total revenues in that fund of $125 million. And then each year we're required to transfer funds from the capital projects fund to the general fund for our ongoing technology training and applications. And that's a requirement, state accounting requirement. It's capital projects levy funds. You're required to spend them in the general fund, and then you transfer money from capital to general. And then we do have a transfer, a budgeted transfer to the debt service fund to pay for principal and interest should we do an LGO bond sale in the future. And then so total expenditures of $196 million in that fund with an ending fund balance of $24 million. And I'll just detail out the major expenditure projects in this fund. We have completion of our 2016 bond projects, completion of Timberline, Meade, Kirk Elementary, which will open this fall, and then our Juanita High Rebuild and Enlarge. Phase 1 is opening this fall, and Phase 2 will open fall of 2020, and then our Old Redmond Schoolhouse project, which will be complete in fall of 2020. And then the budget also includes beginning to spend money for our capacity and safety projects, our Lake Washington High addition, and then planning and design for our elementary additions. And then finally, our 4-year levy projects for facilities and technology, our building system and improvements, code compliance, program improvements, such as traffic improvements, and then athletic and playfield upgrades, and then our ongoing upgrades of our technology infrastructure, equipment, and software. So next, moving on to our Transportation Vehicle Fund. This is a fund that is solely used to purchase buses, student buses, and we have a beginning fund balance of $3.8 million. Our revenues are about $808,000, and that is our state depreciation funds that we are provided as we have aging buses. We are provided reimbursement from the state, and then investment earnings. And we are, 19 years ago, we passed a transportation levy, and we are still using those funds slowly, along with our state depreciation funds, to replace our aging bus fleet. And that levy wasn't intended for growth, but the good news is we have been able to sustain our transportation vehicle fund without having to renew that levy at this time. And then right now the budget assumes a replacement of 15 buses for $1.9 million for an ending fund balance of $2.6 million. So moving on to our general fund. So just a quick update on the legislative impacts to our budget. This is the second year of McCleary, and so our levy was reduced for the second year in anticipation of increased revenue from the state, and so the district asked voters for less, knowing that we would receive additional state funding. And then the McCleary adjustment, they provided minor increase into our special education funds. And then they also, as part of McLeary, we are moving, you will hear me use the term SEB a couple times throughout this presentation, moving to a statewide employee benefits program. SEB stands for School Employee Benefits Board, and that is the name of the new program that will move all employee benefits from district managed to really state managed, and that starts mid-year, January 1, 2020. The other legislative impacts to our budget were additional staffing that was required for K-3, and then required paraeducator training. The inflationary adjustment, the COLA this year was 2%, and then there was a small increase in the pension rate. So our general fund budget, the beginning fund balance, we're estimating at $68 million. We are estimating revenue of $455 million. That transfer that I talked about for the technology expenditures of $8.6 million comes into the general fund. So total revenues of $463 million, and then expenditures of $466 million, and our ending fund balance of $65 million. And we intentionally are planning slight use of this fund balance, and we'll talk more about that later on in the presentation. So moving forward on key changes to our budget, enrollment is a key driver of both our revenues and expenditures. And so the purpose of budgeting, we're estimating the following changes in our enrollment. We are increasing, you can see at our elementary, middle, and high school, a little over 100 students at each level. So 388 students growth in our budget. That's actually, we actually were a little lower than our budget this year. And so we actually are expecting growth of about 500 students. And so we are funded on our average annual FTE. So that's what these figures represent. They do not represent headcount. They represent average annual FTE. And then we are conservative in our budget when estimating enrollment. And we do provide, on top of these numbers, what we call a contingency of 500 students, and that contingency is there, so should those students show up at the district, we can hire the staff needed for those. It allows us to spend the money when we receive it. So key changes in some other programs in CTE, which is included in our, these also drive revenues and expenditures from budget to budget. The CTE programs are declining slightly from budget to budget, though that is based on actual experience this year. And then special education, in a very small decline from budget to budget, and the majority, some of that is in preschool and birth to 2. We're down just slightly in K-21. So, and then our English learners, we are actually growing by 425 students, or 15%. That program continues to grow, and our exits are seeing a similar increase. The state provides funding for students who exit the program for 2 years of transition funds after they exit. And then our Running Start enrollment, that increase is based on the increase that we saw this year. So we're continuing to see growth in our Running Start program. So the next few slides will talk about the key changes to revenue in the general fund. And so first, our state impacts due to state legislative changes. As I mentioned, salary, the main driver of the state salary benefits and pension is the School Employee Benefits Board, the move to SEB, and staff COLAs. And then our material supplies and operating costs, the state provided an increase of $1.4 million, and then our special education formula change of $1 million. And then our enrollment changes due to enrollment or levy. As our enrollment grows, our basic ed and special ed enrollment impacts 2.7 million. And then, as I mentioned, our levy, we're seeing the second year of a decrease in our levy due to we asked our voters for less. And so that's a $3.1 million decline. The first year, or the first impact was that in the 2018-19 budget. And then our categorical grants, so these are grants that if we receive more money, we also have to spend that money. Those funds can't be used in other places. So those are increasing by 4.5 million for a total local impact of 4.1 million. So our key changes, continuing on with our federal grants, we received a large increase in our Title I funds this year. We had about 3 or 4 years ago, our Title I funds were cut in half, and there's a formula, a poverty level, that if you go above a certain level, you get a large either decrease or increase, and we are now back what we call on the cliff. We fell off the cliff a couple years ago. We're back up on that cliff. And so we're going to receive additional funds for, we think, probably 3 years, and then it could change again. So we're making a plan on how to spend those funds in the short term. And so that's about 1.2 million. Our federal special ed safety net, we increased, we are receiving additional state safety net award money for our high-cost students, and we receive that both through state funds and federal dollars, and so we're increasing the budget to reflect what we actually receive from the state. And then our federal IDEA federal special ed funds also increased by about $500,000. So overall, $2.7 million in federal grants. And then our other self-supporting programs, other grants such as Extended Day, we're expanding our Extended Day program, nutrition services, summer school, those all contribute to $1.6 million in new revenue. And then just to summarize those slides, so total revenue changes of $23.2 million from last year's budget. And then this slide just provides a different look at our revenues by the what you see in the actual budget document. It's a comparison of the state-defined revenue categories from the prior year budget to the proposed budget. So our state apportionment is the largest source of our revenues, and they're determined by our number of students attending our schools and formulas including legislatively set bases and benefits and non-salary allocation. And the primary increase there is due to enrollment, the state COLA, and the SEB. And the next category, state categorical, is funds from the state special ed, transportation, English learners, our learning assistance program. These are the revenues that they're not available for other purposes. The increases there are primarily in LAP, ELL, and highly capable enrollment. And then our federal funds, as I mentioned, those include things as supplemental special ed, Title I, Head Start. So our main increase there is our Title I and increase in the federal special ed. And then our levy funds, those must be approved by our community every 4 years. Our last approval was in February of 2019. And so those were reduced, as I mentioned. And then fee programs, those include our school lunches, preschool, our extended day and summer school, and the increase there is primarily due to expansion of our extended day program, and also due to the opening of the new Juanita High School Performing Arts Center in the fall. And then the other category, those are the transfer from capital projects funds. And the slight decline is just based on actual projected spending. So overall, our revenue budget is increasing by 5.3%. So this is a slide that we shows kind of the history of our funding sources by percentage, and the just to show how the percentage of state funding has changed over time. And the good news is the 12-13 school year was really our low point. Starting in 2008, the state really changed how they were funding schools, and more and more of the responsibility on schools was shouldered by our local taxpayers, and kind of the low point at the 61, combining the state basic and state categorical at 61.9%. And our levy at almost 23% was really the lowest. And as you can see, starting in 1819, once McCleary came into play, the state is now contributing almost 76.9% of our budget, and the levy is about 13.1%. Now, the challenging thing is also they're increasing how much they spend in the categorical accounts, which kind of limits our flexibility for how we can spend those dollars. So key changes in our expenditure budget. Total overall is a $48 million increase in our expenditure changes, and this represents 11.5% increase over last year. And staffing due to enrollment increases is the first category of $2.3 million. We also are opening a new school, Timberline Middle School, and expanding our Juanita High School theater. And then the next category, the K-3 safety net staffing, is a required expenditure of $3.2 million. And then the largest category, of course, is our compensation and our benefits. And the key driver of that is the change into the SEB program is a large driver of that. And then our self-supporting grants, we are receiving revenue, and then we spend those funds of $8.3 million. And then we also have additional fixed costs every year for heats, lights, utilities, insurance, contractual services, audit costs, and those types of things. And then each year in our budget, we budget one-time expenditures, so not to commit things long-term, and that's $1.5 million that is not carrying forward. And then additional $6.7 in strategic and organizational work, and we will go over that in more detail later on in the presentation. And we shared that at the study session in June also. So we are required to put this in our budget presentation. It's a legislative requirement to include our MSOC information in our budget and process. So the state funds about $38.5 million in material, supplies, and operating costs, and we are budgeting to spend $32 million in material, supplies, and operating costs, and there's a difference of $6.5 million, and that difference is being used to fund, because special education is not fully funded by the state, it provides for substitute costs, professional learning, additional compensation for curriculum work, meetings, and training. And all of those items have obvious educational benefit and impact to student achievement. So this is our expenditure program summary showing again, by state-defined categories, how we are spending our dollars and how they compare to the prior budget year. So for regular education, which is the main, that contains the cost of our K-12 teachers, our support staff, our building budgets, district-level programs such as curriculum, professional development, and the increases there are due to operational costs of opening new programs, staffing increases, compensation, and organizational adds. Our alternative learning experience is our expenditures for Emerson K-12 increased due to, again, just program and staff COLAs and benefits. Special education category, there's about a 14% increase there. That contains our special ed students, including birth to two, preschool, and early learning support. So that's primarily increased due to early learning, our IDA grant, and safety net award increase. Then our CTE program, just a small decrease there due to adjusting the budget for actual enrollment. And then our Skills Center program, also just a small increase, inflation. And then compensatory ed is our programs such as Title I, Title II, our Head Start, and the increases there come from Title I, LAP, and English language, or English learners. And the district-supported preschool early learning was also increased there. And then in our other instructional, that includes our summer school and other grant programs. and a small increase there. And then in our community services program, that contains our extended day, our stadium and performing arts, and the increases there is due to our expansion of our extended day program and the Juanita High Theater performing arts budget there. And then in the district-wide support, that includes our business functions, accounting, payroll, communications, utilities, our support services, tech operations. It's also where we charge our audit costs and legal fees, and the increase are in fixed costs due to utilities for our new buildings, insurance, and investments in strategic work. And then the last categories are nutrition services and transportation, and just increases due to inflationary program costs. So overall, 11.5% increase. So the next two slides provide information on our 4-year required outlook. This is a new state requirement, or as part of the budget document last year was a new state requirement. And we have always, even though the state is requiring this, our district has always taken the long view and looked beyond a 1-year view, done long-term enrollment projections and financial projections. So we want to make sure we make decisions today with the long-term view in mind. So our budget plan was prepared by taking into account enrollment growth and legislative mandates. We have assumptions of a small enrollment growth of about 1% a year, no significant changes in state funding. We assume the levy is based on our current voter-approved amounts, and our expenditure assumptions, we will continue to need to align staffing as enrollment grows. And then we will have ongoing local cost needs over state funding for salary, benefits, and retirement, and ongoing fixed cost increases and strategic ads. And we do provide in our budget some one-time spending so we don't commit future dollars that aren't there. So this slide shows the 4-year plan, and the first column includes the 2018-19 budget because it's important to show that because of McCleary, we knew in 2018-19 we actually increased our fund balance. We knew that there was additional required spending that was coming on board in 2019-20, and so you can see that as we increase that fund balance in 19-20, and then this plan really, we have an intentional use to to use that fund balance to help offset the difference between our revenues and expenditures. And we also delayed some expenditures, knowing additional impacts were coming. And then in addition, we're going to need to continue to provide additional support in the budget due to the growth in our district. And so we really have kind of put this plan together to really bring the fund balance back kind of to the level it was in the 2018-19 school year. So it's we have a positive financial outlook. So the next few slides were shared with the board at the study session in June, and so just to go over how we align our strategic work and our budget. The Lake Washington School District has been awarded the Meritorious Budget Award for the last 2 years, and it really shows the district's commitment to sound fiscal management and budgetary policies, and showing how we align our resources to our strategic plan. Our budget document format and content is in line with the Meritorious Budget Award criteria. So our 5 strategic goals, which you'll learn more about in the next presentation, are academic achievement, well-being, community engagement, excellent staff, and effective use of resources. So in our first goal, academic achievement, we've provided an additional $2.6 million in support for multi-tiered system and support training for inclusion and co-teaching, and then additional support in special education, and then teaching and learning areas such as math and curriculum pilots, highly capable programs, our next generation science standards and science training, and then transcript support. So the next strategic goal of well-being, additional $1.2 million in supports, and we provided resources for equity efforts and training. our safety and security, additional emergency management, SRO support, and campus security uniforms. Students in the area of student services, behavioral health support, interpreter services, and PBIS training. And then health services specialists, additional school nurses. And then in our athletics and activities, our summer athletics and management, and then some activity stipend alignment. And for community engagement, additional about almost $500,000 for community engagement tools, link support, our Lunch Buddy program, school webmaster support, and support for our sustainability efforts, and then community and government relations support. And then our goal of excellent staff, $1.3 million in resources for human resources, additional, as we are a growing district, the need for additional recruiting support is necessary, and then additional professional development, support for our professional learning management system, the legislative required paraeducation certification program, and then training for substitutes for safety and technology training, and then new additional support for our new teacher support program. And then the final goal for effective use of resources, about approximately $1.1 million, additional support in the area of business services, and then facilities maintenance. As we grow, we need to provide additional inspection and testing, and additional ground support and equipment and custodial support, and then also technology, imaging, materials, and procurement needs. So overall, the budget includes $6.7 million in strategic work and additional support investments in strategic work. So, and lastly, the last slide, just a reminder of our next steps. Our budget document is available online on our website. Hard copies can be obtained in the budget office. We will have a public comment period. Community members can go on our website and use Let's Talk to provide comments through August 11th. We will hold a public hearing on the August 12th board meeting, and then formal board action will take place on the 26th. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Director Carlson?
Not so much a question as a comment. So, Ms. Posthumus, managing a general fund budget that's close to $500 million is an unbelievable undertaking. And I wanted to compliment you and your team publicly. Thank you for keeping these budget presentations and the actual budget predictable and routine. Some would misinterpret predictable and routine as unexciting or even boring, but this would be a terrible misinterpretation, because by carefully planning for contingencies and making conservative assumptions every year, you've helped us avoid financial crises, which makes for terrible headlines, but it helps us focus on the important mission of the district, providing a world-class education to all the students. So, in my opinion, there is no higher praise for a district budget than its predictable and routine. So thank you again for all that you do for the district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, I think, well, thank you very much for yet again a fabulous budget presentation.
And I'll shout out to my budget, our budget manager, Lynn Pike, who also put her blood, sweat, and tears into this process and documents. So thank you to Lynn for all of her work on that too. So, thank you.
So thank you. So as was noted by Barbara, a copy of the summary budget is available from the business office or can be found on our website. Feedback can be provided via the website or email. And a public hearing will be held on August 12th board meeting, and you're welcome to come to that if you have any comments specific to the budget. So thank you very much. And with that, we will move forward to our board policies. It's the second reading of the governing culture and board superintendent relationships. So these were the policies that were first presented at the June 10th board meeting. They will replace the board's current governance process and board CEO relationship policies. There have been a few minor changes which were made that are shown in underline or strike-through language. Those were sent out with the board agenda. And so there'd be a few things, I believe, in the governance culture 10, the last one, which is acceptable use policy, that will not be included. We'll only go through 9. That was incorporated into governance culture 7 on board code of conduct that just follow the acceptable use policy. So any questions in regards to the changes that were there? They were all very minor. Also in GC3, the governance culture 3, there is a correction that needs to be played. I can see it. Currently, it says, perform other duties required by law or delegated to the superintendent. It should read, perform other duties required by law or not otherwise delegated to the superintendent. Significantly different with those two words. So I would propose that it is amended with that.
Do we need a motion for that? No. Okay, I agree with you.
Any other changes through that? With that, I would now entertain a motion to approve the governing culture 1 through 9 and the board superintendent relationship 1 through 5 policies as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion around those? All right, so it has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Sage that we approve the governing culture 1 through 9 and board superintendent relationship 1 through 5 policies as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So we now have approved those 2 policies. The next set, we briefly spoke about these tonight, which were the operational expectations and our results policies. These are on for the first reading. So we discussed them. You've all had the opportunity to read through those in that discussion tonight, the study session. The next step that we spoke to was that Mark and I would meet with Dr. Stavum to just go through some of the changes to then bring those back for a second reading in August and have those sent out to you prior. If there's no other discussion or questions, we'll go forward with that as our next step on those. Okay, so we're good with those policies. So moving on to the next thing, we have approval of our monitoring board policies. There are 4 of those of our 14 tonight, so we will be moving through those as quickly as possible with any questions and using the process we have. So just as a reminder, we are updating those, just speaking about. So this is still in the old method. We'll be revising those and be going through the reasonable interpretation starting in the fall through all of these. So just to remind you about these monitoring policies. So our first one will be the Executive Limitation 3, Communication and Counsel to the Board. So with that, I will let Dr. Stavum present her quick summary.
Yep, we'll just go through the different sections. This report evaluates the primary components of our current EL3, Communication and Counsel of the Board. It provides information to you on a range of topics related to information that's provided to the board by the superintendent so that the board remains adequately informed about all manner of district business and related community issues. So just going through the sections, I believe all sections were in compliance with no change, so I'll just make a couple of notes. In section 1, where we have appropriate submission of monitoring reports, we'll be using an updated template next year that reflects our revised policies and processes as related to our coherent governance structures, including reasonable interpretation and our indicators. Second section, in compliance, focuses on communication with the board, making sure that multiple factors are included, things like routine district information, time-sensitive information, emergency or crisis, and emergent issues. So for next year, we'll continue to provide information to the board and begin connecting information to the strategic plan whenever we can, and attaching those also to relevant board development opportunities. Section 3 focuses on appropriate notification regarding financial matters, particularly those that substantially affect the district's financial condition. There's no change there. in compliance, same as last year. Section 4 covers information that informs the board relative to external viewpoints and opinions so that you can form board-level decisions. I would just add to this that one of the things I don't believe was listed were the community engagement forums that help to inform our revised strategic plan process. I think we all felt that was very valuable and look forward to how we can convene some more forums next year around relevant topics. Section 5 covers informing the board when there's a likelihood of significant media coverage. That's in compliance, and I know that I have told the board this before, that that has been a nice welcome change from my past experience. So we have very positive relationships with the media in our area, and they've done a good job of covering things in our district. Section 5.6, I missed that one. Section 6 was in compliance from last year. Section 7, we'll go to that one, covers how information is shared, making sure it's concise and in understandable format, no change. This is in compliance. Section 8 covers the ability for board members to receive communication from constituents, again in compliance with no change. And as we have continued to kind of build out Let's Talk, we'll continue with that next year with district folks getting some additional training, but I know that's been something that's been helpful. And one of the things I just noted is as we move forward, some looking at our website and how we connect people to you, connect people to Let's Talk, and we'll just want to continue making sure that people are aware of that opportunity. Section 9 covers a practice of communication with the board as a whole. That's in compliance with no change from last year. Section 10 covers timely reporting of any non-compliance issues with board governing policies. That's in compliance with no change from last year. Section 11 covers items that would be allowable under consent agenda. This is in compliance as well. And I think just as part of our new processes next year when we're building agendas, particularly when we get to monitoring reports or other things, just re-looking at that, what goes on consent versus non-consent. Section 12 covers the establishment of appropriate procedures for informing the board when issues brought through a public meeting have been resolved. This is in compliance with no change from last year. And last but not least, Section 13 covers processes that allow for approval of school attendance boundary as they impact families, community, and alignment with district operations. And there's no compliance there. We haven't had to do significant boundary work this year, but just a little bit with some processes we had to follow. That would be it for EL3.
Any questions or clarifications for Dr. Stavum on EL3?
So in the big picture, we're just going to be moving into next year with the reasonable interpretation and all that. This is really just wrapping up the existing system. It didn't change from last year to this year. I have no concerns.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, so with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the monitoring report as presented for EL3, communication and counsel to the board.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson. Is there any discussion around compliance or anything? With that, I will then take a vote. It has been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we approve the monitoring report for EL3, communication and counsel to the board as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on. Thank you so much.
So next is EL5. This is actually a thicker one, but I think I can be a little bit more concise in my summary because I think there are some themes that run through here that I noted both in the executive summary as well as just some of the different points in the report. But really this EL is about our ability to communicate well with current district families, students, our community at large, while also complying with the state and federal laws and best practices. And so how do we resolve things? How do we communicate? How do we get a pulse on what's happening in our district? There are a lot of different things that are covered in this. Access to information, the different things that we've done to improve upon that ability for people to know what's happening, to get their needs met. One of the things that's been utilized by our district for a number of years are some surveys that have kind of been validation points for how we believe things are going. And I would like to suggest that for next year, one of the things that we'll be doing internally is just reviewing the survey tools that have been used along the way and really working to align the questions with our strategic plan work as well as best practices, and making sure that we're asking the right questions so that we get the data that's very useful. And we have some ability with some of our newer tools with the way that we can ask questions more often. We can do it in some new creative ways as we bring on some new tools like Thought Exchange. But I think how we update people on the strategic plan, how we foster that community engagement, which is one of our strategic plan areas, I think we can continue to both validate and get information that's really usable to us as we look at how do we then make improvements. So I'll just go through the report quickly. Each of the sections are in compliance. On section 2, I just noted that for next year, like I said, we'll review our data sources and see if there are some more effective ways to measure our current district patrons as well as community members. One of my points of mild frustration was when I looked at the fact that we kind of have forced choices, and when we're asking some of the questions that would be more relevant for if you have children currently in the district, there wasn't an option to indicate if something wasn't relevant to your experience, and I'd like to see us kind of rectify some of those questions. Section 3 is in compliance, which focuses on federal and state laws, non-discrimination policies and procedures. Section 4 is on our efforts to provide a welcoming environment as people come and go from our district facilities, our schools, as well as district office. Again, we want to make sure that we have data sources that we are giving clear indicators of satisfaction. I said some of our data lacks the connection of an actual experience with a survey question. And so we ask people about their experience coming to our schools, but one of their choices is not, I haven't come to a school. So wanting to do some alignment of those kinds of things. And section 5 is on providing a welcoming environment, again, on responsiveness and treating people well. This is in compliance with no change from last year. Same points above. We want to make sure that we have district perception as well as school perception. One of the things that is very common, if you look at the Phi Delta Kappan large-scale study that's done yearly, people will answer a little bit differently when you ask about their perception of their school versus a perception of a district, and we need to be able to tease that out a little bit. Section 6 refers to the establishment of systems that allow for public participation and community involvement. We found this to be in compliance with no change. Again, looking on district surveys for frequency, redundancy, validity to inform our ongoing work. We had administered another survey that was very similar to the one that we had used for many, many years as kind of that validation survey. So we chose not to administer that fall 2018 survey because we also have to think about how frequently we ask those kinds of questions, but also just making sure that we have a consistency of questions and responses so we get the information we need. Section 7 refers to the ability of parents in the community to access information that informs them about school and district level programs and services, as well as specific information about academic progress. We are in compliance. We've made progress in making sure information is available in electronic formats. We've tried to really offer a variety of ways: print, web, infographics, school messenger, all of those different ways that we share information. We've also added a few new web page features. One of the newest ones, Special Ed just added a new parent resource page, just as of, I think, maybe last week. You'll be getting a board brief, I believe, on that. But those are the kinds of things where we hear different things through things like our community feedback forums, like parents, and then we want to put those things into practice. So we know that we have to continually be working on that, but have also made some significant improvements. I would say the other thing that goes along with that is the investments that we're making for next year on our ability to translate information and to make sure that people have things accessible in the ways that they need it when they need it. So with that, I find EL5 to be in overall compliance.
Thank you. Any questions? Dr. Sage, Director Sage.
I could be a doctor today, sure. Well, as far as the thought exchange, is that something completely different than a Let's Talk app?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say complementary, but different.
Okay. And then just a thought, I was speaking with my visually impaired neighbor over the weekend, and a lot of times when there's a PDF on the website, obviously their software cannot translate what a person with vision would be able to get out of it. So I know we're probably on top of that issue. What do we do if there's a PDF version that somebody who is visually impaired can't translate?
One of our initiatives for next year and our anticipated partnership with Microsoft is that overall accessibility. And part of that is our website accessibility. Shannon and her team have been working on those things, but some of those aren't easily solved. But we need some expertise to do that, and part of it is doing at the point of creation. So if we're creating a document, that we run it through some of those accessibility checks before it's posted. Some of it may mean that we have some other mechanisms of sharing those things if our current website doesn't have all of the capabilities that we need, but we're just new into that. So there's multiple layers to accessibility, but that's one of them. Our PowerPoints that we post for a board meeting, can those be read or made accessible for people who are visually or hearing impaired? So we have a lot of work to do there, but we're aware of that. The team has started to work on that, but we need some help to do that too.
Great.
So I don't have a great solution for her right now, but we would be happy to look at what somebody is finding to be inaccessible, so we know about it too, which is helpful.
She had just mentioned the PDF, so I thought I'd pass it on.
Yeah,
And she
that's
also
good.
mentioned that Lego has come out with Braille Lego blocks. I'm just saying. Sounds kind of cool.
Yes, and business cards are the other new thing that we've been seeing more with Braille. So those are all examples of where we need to step it up.
On page 4 of the 12, which would be establishing policies and procedures to ensure organizational compliance with federal and state laws. I have no problem with the compliance in the year to date. What I would like to recommend as we look forward, that we have a uniform approach to communications restrictions from one school to the next. What constitutes why you should be restricted and what doesn't, because they vary from school to school to school. And I think that's important, that if a parent has children at one school, that it's applied the same equally to the other parents at the other school.
We'll note that. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions for clarification, I will entertain a motion to approve the report as presented for EL 5.
Move approval of the report as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion around compliance? All right, well, thank you. Appreciate the look at alternative methods in which to be collecting some of this information and being able to engage on more from the surveys and being able to actually utilize that. So that's great going forward that we can continue to do that. So with that, we will now take a vote. All those in favor to approve as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, EL 5 is done. Thank you.
All right.
EL 6.
On to EL 6. EL 6, again, a pretty extensive report, provides information about treatment of students, conditions that create a safe place to learn and free from unnecessary disruption. It really addresses all of those different things that touch the classroom environment, from academic supports to our policies and procedures, our handbooks, making sure that information is clear, we're accountable for how we enforce that district policy, suspension and expulsion practices, deterrence supports, so pretty big EL. So overall, we find this to be in compliance. We'll go through the sections. Section 1 is really an important one, I think, particularly when we talk about student well-being. We talk about mental health, and that's helping students maintain that healthy balance of being involved academically during the school day, as well as in the activities that they choose to participate in outside of the school day. This is in compliance with no change from last year. This is something we'll continue to focus on as we move forward with our strategic plan initiatives around well-being. Section 2 focuses on instructional continuity. This is in compliance with no change. Section 3 focuses on instructional time that is not interrupted. This is one of my personal pet peeves and has been ever since my first weeks of teaching, which means that as a district we have to collaborate with our building leaders because sometimes we create our own issues. And it's really at a building level when we have to sometimes say no to some things that are very worthy things to learn about or know about, but we have to constantly work to preserve that instructional time. There are just daily things that can erode that, from announcements all the way to external groups that would love to come in during that school day. So something that's important and has to continue to be important. Section 4 covers responsibility of adults, making sure that they are doing their part to create a safe place for kids to learn and grow, and that we don't inhibit a student's performance academically because of adult behaviors. This covers a lot of legal and procedural safeguards. It also requires that we continue to work on our equity work, assuring that we have culturally responsive classrooms and schools that really are addressing barriers to learning. Section 5 covers policies that govern student conduct and discipline. This district is updating student discipline practices and policies for next year. We have a lot of new pieces that we have to make sure that we're aligning with laws that have been revised recently. We're also updating administrative policies for greater alignment with the standard policy systems. So we'll have new policy as well as it fitting into those revised district administrative policies. But I was just reading over it last week with Matt Gillingham and just being really careful and making sure that we're following the letter of the law. It's pretty extensive with the changes, which is a good thing. Section 6 refers to collaborative processes in place that review and refine discipline policies and procedures, and that's in compliance. Again, aligning it with our new laws will mean that we have to align all of our existing documents and processes. Section 7 covers annual review and distribution of the student handbook. This is in compliance with no change. Section 8 covers that distribution of the handbook and making sure we reflect those significant changes. That's in compliance with no change. Section 9 ensures that copies of district policies are posted and available for inspection in schools and on the website, noting any significant changes. This is in compliance with no change from last year. And Section 10 ensures that policies are reasonably enforced. And again, this is in compliance with no change. Last section is Section 11, covers processes for identifying and supporting students who are at risk of being suspended or expelled and taking steps to help them avoid these consequences. I just put a note under this one. It focuses on our work where we're continuing to invest in practices that help us avoid those exclusionary settings for students. The goal is to keep them in class and learning. Part of that is continuing to implement that multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, as well as positive behavior intervention and supports. And you saw things reflected in our budget for both of those. Those are critical for all schools, not just some schools, and so part of it is aligning that work across the district. And then we also have to be proactive in our work to support our students who are struggling with some things, including substance abuse and the impact that that can have on behavior. Students wanting to leave class, it's becoming epidemic. You'll see that some of our discipline referrals went up, and if you look at tobacco, what that looks like, a lot of that is vaping. And school districts across the nation, communities are confronting that as a major health problem, and we see that manifested in a lot of different ways. So we know that we have to continue to partner with professional providers around substance abuse and treatment. We have to be informing parents, and I think we have to start that younger and younger, as well as helping students know what to do, both in preventative ways as well as what to do if I'm finding myself in trouble and I need some help. One of the hardest things, of course, as we all are reading about with vaping, is it is highly addictive and highly easily concealed. And so to detect it, it isn't like the old days when we could smell if a student had gone somewhere to smoke a cigarette. It is very difficult to detect. And in speaking with some police officers recently, they are seeing more and more theft-related incidences in communities where there's easy access to some of the products that go along with that. And so I think it just speaks to the fact that this has to be a community concerted effort. Students are wanting to help with that process, so I think it's peer-to-peer. It's also all of us really looking for ways that we can combat that problem, because ultimately, students are missing class, they're engaging in behaviors that we know are not healthy for them long-term, and we want them to be healthy both while they're here in Lake Washington as well as beyond. So that's just a little bit of my soapbox for that particular EL, and I think that's the biggest one to stand on right now.
Thank you.
I have some of our questions, some of them are just points to consider for next year. As we look at number 1, extracurricular obligations of students, we talk about avoiding conflict with religious holidays and Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
In the same auspices of our equity work, we're not talking just Sundays, we're also talking Saturdays for many of our students.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps that ought to be reflected as we look at that, just from an equity standpoint.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. You know, increasingly, things are encroached upon with some of those out-of-district dates, and that might be something too. Matt, I don't know what the stance is of WIAC? WIAC, did I get it right? WIA. Just because of scheduling and logistics and field time and shared field use and travel, and so all those play into it. We are pushing out that cultural calendar as early as possible to avoid what can be avoided, but we're also coordinating with many, many other districts, and so how we communicate that with them is important, as well as the WIA.
Well, not really. I understand the restrictions with other districts, but when we're concerned about events within our own district, that's something that we have controls over, I think it should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. Here we are. Number 5, adopted administrative policy on conduct and discipline, which...
Which page are you on, Mark?
I'm sorry, it's 6 of 16, after the second bold line. 6.5. Discipline policies which prohibit student behavior, blah, blah, blah. I don't see anything in here, and I think we ought to look forward as opposed to looking back, because you can't change the past, that we need to address behaviors that are manifestations of disabilities. Because, as I understand it from ADA, that is not something that's open to discipline. You have to figure out ways of correcting that behavior, but you cannot discipline someone for their manifestation of their disease or their disability, I'm sorry.
Right, that's part of that manifestation determination process. Yep.
Let's see. Section 10, page 15 of 16. I'm not seeing, I see all this data and it's great that we've got so far. What I'm not seeing is any data on restraint or seclusion. And it'd be helpful if we have that in the future of not only, if we had any situations that we require it, but also our reporting method for it. And bear with me one second here. Yeah, and also in that same venue, that as we tour facilities from one school to the next, making sure that the criteria for seclusion or restraint is same from school to school to school.
Yep, that's a part of that consistency piece with PBIS.
Yeah,
Yep, good to
we
know.
seem to have a little inconsistency at times, so.
Okay, good, thank you.
What age do we begin education on vaping?
Know the answer to that. Matt, do you know how early healthy habits start? Very early, but I don't know that we call out tobacco use or substance abuse.
Yeah, so we have in our middle schools the first time that students take an explicit health course, and so substance abuse, substance use is covered there. That's also at the middle schools where we first have our prevention interventionists, who part of their job is to help support that at the school level.
Thank you. Do we have building level reports on issues of vaping at elementary schools?
I have not heard much, but I honestly haven't asked.
I hope
think it's
not, but-
pretty, yeah, I think it's pretty, it would be an outlier at the elementary level. We are beginning to hear more about middle school level.
Okay.
And I think just because of the nature of some of the products that are out there, it has a natural student appeal to it at a younger and younger age. And so that's on us to also address it at a product level and to ask our business partners to consider the effects of those products being available, even where they're located in stores. There's a lot coming out more and more all the time, but truly something difficult that school districts are dealing with.
Great, thank you.
I agree that we're in compliance. I do note one area of concern is that the number of long-term suspensions went up this past year after declining for the previous decade. So I just wanted to note that as an area of concern for me. I know that's been at the board level has been a priority is reducing exclusionary discipline, in particular long-term suspensions, which we know have a significant impact on student achievement.
One of the issues behind that we've noticed had a bit of an uptick this year was illicit use of drugs and having some of those offenses that result in some automatic disciplines, like long-term suspension. The other thing is I was asking Matt Gillingham about some of these areas was that the rules continue to change on how we report and the consistency factor. And we've also had some administrative changes at a building level where we have different people who are doing the data collection from year to year. So we've been working with administrators to have good continuity of how those things are reported, documented, but we've also seen that there have been some significant changes in student trends this year.
So just to build on that, that was the one piece I had noted, because we did have that decline for a period and it sort of flattened, and now we see this increase. So the pieces, are you looking at, I think, of restorative justice practices and sort of those work? So how are we looking at approaching this differently going forward?
yeah,
Or
Matt can
and that
speak
could
to
be in
that.
the future if that's easier than right now, but.
I actually get a program report where I get to go into a little bit more depth on that in just a few
There you
minutes.
go.
Perfect, then we will wait for that to happen, but that was sort of the next question, so thank you, appreciate that.
Just so you're aware, there was a report this evening on Como as I was coming to the meeting that the state is going to be looking at seclusion and restriction, how you define it and how you define the reporting of it, because they gave one school district that had 45 and 3 districts, including our own, saying 0. And it just didn't quite wash from a this doesn't make sense level.
Right.
So
Yep.
just FYI.
Yeah, thank you. I would also just note that sometimes when a district is trying to improve on that consistency factor, it can also lead to more referrals because of trying to be consistent. I will also say we had some challenges at one of our high schools this year with just logistics and where external restrooms were located, and you know, some of those things, you can have an outlier year because of just some things that are naturally contributors to that, and it doesn't make it better, but it gives you maybe just a little bit of a why behind things, although it's also difficult to tell. I will tell you our building administrators pay close attention to, but all of those things are pieces that we need to work on. Consistency, follow through, how we report, all of those, and deterring the behaviors. You ready?
Any
Next
other
one?
questions? No, we have one more step to go
Okay.
before you can move on.
Yeah.
So I will now entertain a motion to approve.
Move approval as
Second.
presented.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director La Liberty. Any further discussion on this? I would think it's important that we continue to keep that focus. I think that is an interesting piece on the exclusionary and suspensions and that whole component and seclusion and restraint. Those are sort of pieces that are important going forward to be able to be paying attention to. So appreciate that we'll hear more in this evening. With that, all those in favor of approving the report as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? All right, then we move on to our last one for this evening, Executive Limitation 8, Instructional Material Selection.
And I'm going to make this rather brief just because you've had a couple of presentations very recently about the extensive processes that we go through for materials selection. So I am just going to note that this EL was in compliance with each of the sections also being in compliance with no change from last year.
Any questions in regards to that EL and compliance on selection?
I appreciate the efficiency of presentation.
You're welcome.
Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve EL 8 as presented.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, I would just like to say I thank you, the team, for having the community involved and making sure that that instructional material selection does involve multiple players throughout. And that involves a good piece in making it very solid going forward. So with that, we'll entertain, actually, I will vote to approve the report as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, well, thank you. It passes, and that was all four. So thank you very much for going through that, and look forward to the reasonable interpretations that we'll be doing in the fall.
Me too. So we have Matt Gillingham, who is our incoming Associate Superintendent for Student and Community Services. And I have to say, as we kind of put all the pieces together for next year, I think we're all really excited as we continue to build on those things that started to make an impact, but now need to make sure that they are district-wide. So the investments that we've put forth in the training and in the best practices, and making sure that all schools are equipped to deal with low-level needs, just routines and procedures, as well as culturally responsive classrooms in line with our equity work and that whole MTSS structure. And, you know, things change in school districts all the time. One year is never the same at a school level as well as a district level, but we have to make sure that we are removing some of the variables, so when we do go to look at discipline data or referral or even just perceptual data, that we know we have some level of assurances around what we expect at each building. So Matt's going to talk about that now with the things that support our students and the practices that we're putting in place.
Thank you, Dr. Stavum. I'm going to provide just a brief program review. I'm going to highlight a couple of data points regarding student discipline and the Healthy Youth Survey. And then I'm going to talk about kind of what our next steps are looking ahead to be able to support our students. So as we just reviewed, we've had a slight reduction in students avoiding exclusionary discipline. We are still hovering in that 98 to 99% of all of our students avoiding exclusionary discipline. I think as you mentioned, we did have an uptick in long-term suspensions, and which had been a really nice trend over the past 4 years where we've had a reduction. Some of what we're seeing is students who are repeatedly having difficulty struggling with substance abuse issues, and it's making it difficult for us to keep them at school and have them maintain safe environments at school, and to provide for their education during that time. We have, last year's budget, we did provide funding to provide students with online education in the event that they did need to be removed from school for long periods of time. And so that's an area where we have a method for providing students with access to education. But we still want to bring that back down, and so some of the supports that we're looking at adding speak to address that. And you can see for all of our groups there, I think the lowest, we're again, 98 to 99% of all of our student population over the past 4 years has avoided exclusionary discipline, and our range is generally between 96 and 99% for any groups, which is still one of the lowest rates, or highest rate, I guess, if you're avoiding exclusionary discipline in the state. There was a lot of conversation earlier about vaping, and this is something that even when I first took the role of Director of Student Services was not even asked. And that's how new this is. And unfortunately, we've seen in the past 2 cycles a pretty staggering increase in the rate of students who have answered affirmatively to the question of have they vaped or used an e-cigarette in the past 30 days. This represents about a 6% increase over the 2 years ago. And so it's quite staggering. Dr. Carlson?
I just have to ask a question to prove exactly how uncool I am. But with these vaping pens, it seems like one ought to be able to put whatever one wants into them. So is it limited to nicotine, or is it also?
No, that's a great question. It isn't limited to nicotine. I didn't include that slide in the slide deck. However, all of our results are available on the district website. Roughly 2/3 of the students that indicated that they had used a nicotine substance, and a smaller percentage, about 10%, indicate that they had used a liquid that contained THC. So some of our students don't know what's in it, and some have claimed that it's just what they call e-juice with nothing in it, and which is for flavor and and so. But one of the things that we are starting to see, as Dr. Stavum talked a little bit about, is that we're now a couple of years into this, and we're starting to see students who are actually addicted to nicotine, because the other thing that can happen is there's a higher concentration. And so we are seeing students that are struggling just to be able to cope. So we're having to start thinking about how we respond to this differently than just merely you can't do that at school. This has been a pretty significant increase. When I look at our exclusionary discipline data, even though this year we piloted an alternative to suspension for vaping, the bulk of the increase in suspensions that we saw were due to vaping. This was a new question, and I included it because previously the Healthy Youth Survey asked questions regarding students' social emotional learning, and they removed that this year. And so we're starting to look at other ways in which we can kind of assess our progress in supporting kids. But this is, when we think about being future-oriented, and as a school district, that's being part of our mission. I think this is a slide or a data set that we're going to want to attend to. Currently, roughly about 85% of our students indicate that they're hopeful for the future, but that's 15% of our students that are not feeling that way. And so I don't have anything this is the first time this question was asked this way, but I wanted to share it with you because I think as we're being a future-oriented organization, it's something that we'll want to attend to moving forward. And unfortunately, that number roughly corresponds with the number of students or the percentage of students that have responded affirmatively that they've contemplated suicide. And this too represents an increase over 2 years ago, roughly about 4%. And so as a district, we've provided a lot of supports and resources regarding suicide prevention. I'm excited that we're going to be able to be doing a lot more in this area, but we're outside of vaping, a lot of areas where with the Healthy Youth Survey, we're either holding steady or making progress in the right directions. And a contemplation of suicide's one that's not going into the direction that we'd like it to be.
Do we get these data back on a building level?
Yes, and that data is all released at a building level as well.
So I was just wondering, we've had over the course of the last decade a few buildings that have had a completed suicide and a few buildings that haven't. Does this vary depending on that?
Not significantly.
Okay.
And we've had a student who's died by suicide all throughout our district. It's not been isolated to any particular region.
Yeah, there have been enough that it's not. Yeah.
So I'd like to. That's just a really quick highlight of some things that we're still struggling with. And what I want to talk about is kind of where we're moving forward, and particularly thinking about how we're aligning our systems of support for students. And so in our student handbook, one of the things that when we kind of look at what is it that we're about and how are we trying to address the way of supporting students, and thinking about that, one of it is that we're attending to the environment. And how do we have welcoming environments for our students that are nurturing? And so moving forward, a lot of what we're going to be attending to is what we call Tier 1, or kind of the school environment. The other is that it's instructive. So the ways in which we help to correct students' behavior is to seek to understand that behavior so we can help guide the students to make healthy choices. And that it's restorative in nature to the best that we can, so that we're helping kids kind of learn to be part of their community by tending to when they've caused harm. We kind of touched on this a little bit before in terms of some of our goals. Dr. Savim earlier mentioned one of the things where we also see some increases as we get, I'd say, a little bit tighter in terms of trying to prevent and address issues such as bullying, where kids are causing harm to the other. And that's one where, while we also want to be restorative, we also need to make sure that we're creating safe environments for students who are being harmed and taking actions to if nothing else, create timeouts so that we can figure things out and make sure that kids are feeling safe at school. So I think I've talked with the board or shared with the board that the state of Washington is continuing to advance the social emotional learning benchmarks. And in the latest legislative session, they've continued to fund efforts to break these benchmarks down at a kind of more developmental or grade level. And so we've been using these benchmarks as guideposts for thinking about how we want to support students in developing both their ability to be self-aware and manage themselves, as well as to be aware of others and how to navigate situations. Dr. Savim mentioned that we're starting to implement MTSSB, or it's more commonly known as PBIS, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And really this is thinking about a tiered intervention system where at the universal level, we're focusing on the school environment that all students engage in. We're thinking about how do we explicitly teach the skills for students to be able to navigate that environment. How do we develop relationships and encourage healthy relationships, not only between students, but also between the adults and students? And how do we use data to anticipate where we may have issues or challenges and set up an environment that kind of is predictive in that way? And then thinking about tiered interventions along the way. So one of the things that, for example, like with vaping, that I've been working with Youth Eastside Services is developing both a vaping diversion intervention as well as thinking about kind of what an intervention that we could deliver at the school site, possibly during like early release Wednesdays, where we can, instead of removing students from school, we can engage with them and try to get them connected with support. So thinking about having a myriad of interventions that increase kind of intensity and meet the needs of students where they're at. I'm going to just at each level, we're kind of at different places, and so just kind of briefly walking through a timeline of where we've been at. So at the elementary level, we've made investments in curriculum. We use Second Step at the elementary level. We have started having full-time counselors back in 2017, have been working on building up their capacity, have last year introduced a social emotional learning survey and a school way of surveying students to how welcome and safe they feel at school. And then we've started training a cohort of schools. So we're training about a dozen schools a year in positive behavior intervention support. So throughout the year, we're bringing teams of school leaders together. We're having them trained by the Northwest PBIS Center. And it's actually a multi-year commitment for each school. And then we're supporting that in their second year with coaching supports to push those services into the schools to actually help them implement what they're learning and their professional development. Moving ahead into next year, we're also going to start connecting fidelity data. So we have nearly 30 elementary schools. They all do things a little bit differently. So we're going to be looking at best practices when it comes to the social emotional learning, looking at what is it that each school is doing, and then connecting that to how students are relaying their experiences. And so then we can help highlight best practices to help each school move forward. Moving forward, we'll continue to train elementary schools in PBIS and start training our counselors in tiered interventions that are evidence-based, and we've been working with the University of Washington Smart Center to do some of that work. There's just some examples of our social emotional learning curriculum. We've been using Panorama this year with our 3rd through 8th graders to ask students about their social emotional skills and have them self-report. At the middle level, we have spent 2 years planning for and piloting a screen and brief intervention called SBIRT. And we have been training our counselors over 2 years in motivational interviewing. I think one of the things that we're really focused on middle school is, particularly when we look at like vaping, and you look at the Healthy Youth Survey data, that they just, some of these things increase in the high school levels, that we're trying to get early intervention. So for students who may be at risk of having behavioral issues, whether that's internalized, externalized, that we're connecting with them early, and we're either connecting them with resources early, or we're supporting them through a very brief and non-intensive intervention. We this year also adopted a social emotional learning curriculum for the middle level, and I'm really excited about that. So going into 2019, we're going to be implementing Character Strong. All of our middle schools will be doing that, and we've got a lot of trainings planned and coaching support planned throughout this year. As well as our middle schools are also participating in PBIS, and so over the next 4 years, we'll be training cohorts of schools in PBIS. I think we've talked about SBIRT before. So this upcoming year, we'll be expanding that pilot a little bit more. It's still something we want to go slowly with, because we want to make sure that when we're asking students questions, that we're able to have the people in place to respond to whatever their needs are. And at the high school level, we have this year worked with the University of Washington Smart Center in starting to train our counselors in an evidence-based intervention called BRISC. One of the things that our high school counselors had reported to us was just the increase in anxiety of students was making, there's not enough counselors or mental health counselors out there to refer students to. So again, we're trying to find earlier interventions and get kids connected with supports. We also have been training our behavioral health specialists in an evidence-based program called CBITS, which is a small group intervention, which allows us to serve more kids with the resources that we have. We will be exploring what social emotional learning looks like at the high school over the next couple of years, and we will be training all of our high schools over the next 4 years in PBIS as well. And I think that, so as we look at the kind of the next steps for us, we're really going to be focused on implementing MTSS-B or PBIS so that we have our schools using the best practices, research-based practices in supporting healthy environments, helping kids learn behaviors that are appropriate for school and that are restorative in nature. We'll be implementing and refining our social emotional learning program so we have some consistency across the district, exploring that at the high school, and then we will be expanding our behavioral health support services, particularly at our secondary schools. Right now, we're just, we have folks for a few hours a week and in each school, and that allows them to support kind of the highest risk cases, and expanded services in those areas will allow us to get a little bit more creative in providing more interventions, hopefully to be able to work ahead a little bit earlier.
Matt, can you just clarify, we had a question earlier about restorative practices and restorative practice. You hear those terms kind of used interchangeably. Can you just define what actual training is and where it fits in with PBIS?
Yeah, so restorative practices, if you think, it has they have two aims or two goals. One of those is for the person that is harmed. So, I like to tell a story about how when I had some teenage kids crash into my neighbor's fence and break the fence. Well, my neighbor got put right because he got his fence fixed. So thinking about how we repair the harm, and does the person who was harmed kind of do they get made feel right? But the other is the person who did the harm, are they able to take ownership of that? And I use the story of the fence because it was the dads of the kids that repaired the fence instead of the kids. And so it's never sat right with me because the people that were actually repairing the harm weren't the ones that caused the harm. And so as we talk about restorative practices, there's protocols for using that. We've introduced and talked with our administrators about that. And how you do that. It does require a delicate touch, particularly when we're talking about cases of bullying, because it's not something that should be forced upon somebody who has been harmed or feels victimized by another student. So it really has to be this mutual kind of acceptance of a way to want to move forward. The way we're going about training our schools in PBIS is consistent with restorative practices. So if you take that as a framework, when we're training about PBIS, we're first talking with how do you establish relationships? Because if you're seeking to repair a relationship, it's predicated on that you have a relationship in the first place. So where we're really starting with our schools right now is the importance of establishing relationships and making sure that we send that message to our staff that is a critical part of their job and what's going to create safe and healthy environments. We have a couple of our high schools that are participating in a study with the University of Washington called Establish, Maintain, and Restore. And so what we're trying to do is, instead of having restorative practices and PBIS and everything else kind of be separate, is weave those concepts together as we're training our schools in PBIS. Yes, sir.
As we're looking at the various ways of getting peers involved, Are we doing, I know there's training over at, I think it's Evergreen and some other hospitals on mental health first aid. Are we doing any of that with some of the students to help each other so they can recognize the signs, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we do a couple of trainings. One, we have it in our mandatory staff trainings every year to do a signs of suicide training, and typically our counselors do that every year. But it's on our required trainings, and then our counselors present to students regarding signs of suicide. What's officially known as Youth Mental Health First Aid is a much more involved. It's actually a full day training. It's an excellent training, but it is a pretty significant time commitment. We have been working with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation has had an interest in trying to find ways to promote that. And Evergreen Health has been, and Youth Eastside Services, so two of our community partners have been getting their staff trained so that they can go out and offer those. And it's very much kind of the same approach as first aid and CPR, right? Whereas you kind of create this community ownership of being able to respond to that. So it's something that we're working with our partners, and when they're offering those full day programs, that we've been finding ways to help promote that.
Can I just add to that? We also have a couple of student organizations who are working on some initiatives that are student to student, some as simple as helping kids find a friend, and they are organizing events for kids to come with the mindset of just helping them connect with other kids if they've struggled to do that, and a few other kind of grassroots startups with our kids, understanding the peer-to-peer importance that adults can't fix everything, but kids can fix some things with each other.
No, go first.
Thank you. Your last slide mentioned behavior support services. I believe you said instead of a few hours a day, we were increasing them?
Oh, so we have currently at our high schools, comprehensive high schools, we have part-time behavioral health support service. At our choice high schools, they get not quite 2 days, and at our middle schools, they get about a day a week. And so we're looking with budget increases to be able to increase that, hopefully to be able to get to part-time at all of our schools and full-time at our comprehensive high schools. So, and not just increasing the time, but also looking at how are we helping make sure that those, we're thinking about the services they provide in this context of a tiered intervention system. So using evidence-based interventions, using small group interventions. And so we've been really working to create partnerships with, I've mentioned the University of Washington Smart Center a number of times to help make sure that we're leveraging our investment in human capital so that the work that they're doing is the best work that we can be doing for our kids.
So this is in addition to the social workers that are in our comprehensive high schools sponsored by Evergreen Health, I think?
Yeah, so they're not, so the school district currently contracts with Evergreen Health, and we pay them for part-time social workers in our high schools. And we are looking to expand services with the resources we put in this new budget.
So this is expanding those social workers?
Yep.
This is in addition to, okay, thanks.
Sorry, my question is less informed. So this SBIRT stuff, again, the fact that it has the word screening in it, when I think screening, I think vision screening or hearing screening, where we're going in, we're trying to find the kids who need help, and then we're directly referring them. But the referral to treatment services, as described, is collaboration with the student to decide on a plan of action. It sounds a lot more collaborative and less of a, we're going to find the kids who are in need of service and get them service, and more of teaching kids how to find service if they need it?
It can actually be both. And
Okay.
so the way that we've set it up is we've contracted with Youth Eastside Services so that we have, when we're doing that we actually have somebody who's clinically trained, and because students can flag for suicidality and be at high risk. And in fact, this year, even though we did a fairly small pilot of just a couple hundred students, we identified students who were contemplating suicide that according to their school counselors were not on their radar screen. Those students, we actually make a direct referral so that, and then they're screened, they're doing provide a suicide risk assessment. Some of those then we're connecting with treatment. Some of those we're finding that maybe they didn't, they weren't at a level of concern where we're going to refer them to treatment, but that we're going to get them connected with supports within the school. So, but we have students who indicate concerns in other ways. So, like, for example, some students who might be indicating levels of anxiety that would be concerning about, but that their school counselor can support them through a brief intervention, and that they don't necessarily are presenting at a level that would prompt referral to community services. And one of the things we're trying to manage is, because our community has limited capacity, is that when we're referring students for individualized services, that we're referring students for whom that really is a need, and trying to find lesser interventions or less intensive interventions that we're able to help support or bring community supports into school. And so this allows us to kind of have that SBIRT allows us to have a little bit of that flexibility. And the team triages immediately after the screen, so that's one of the reasons why we're going slow, is to make sure that we're being responsible for our students.
No other questions? Okay. I think that's it. Well, thank you very much. That was very helpful, and being able to see the extensive of the efforts going, and the data was very enlightening with the work that's going forward. So with that, we will move on to a strategic plan overview by Dr. Stevens.
A quick
So we'll pass it off to you.
We're excited about this. This is just the big highlights of the strategic plan that will be rolling out in full next fall with our new school year, with a theme of elevate, which means we're trying to be better in everything that we do. We're trying to elevate our practice, elevate our purpose, and just really take a high-performing district and make it even better. So I'm going to go through the big pieces with you. We also have some work happening right now. We'll have a few different versions of documents that are designed to be helpful to people. We'll have a one-page that helps us as we communicate with our community. We'll have a document that shows things in a little bit more detail, and then we'll have an even more detailed document that we'll be using as our working document within our district. We're also working to try to make the work that happens within the departments in our district more visible to our community, both our internal and our external community, so that people can see the progression of our work. So like Matt was just showing you with the progression around student supports, we want to make sure that we're doing that around all of our strategic plan initiatives. So as we know, it's important for us to keep a very clear and persistent why. Why do we do what we do? Why are we focusing on the things that we are including in our next strategic plan? Our mission is not changing. Our mission is very much still every student graduating prepared to lead that rewarding life, being responsible and contributing members of our community and our greater society. Every student being ready for the future, prepared for college, prepared for the global workplace, and ultimately prepared for their personal success. And when I sat at graduation with all of you last week, some of us sat through many of them at one point, and every student that walked across the stage, I look at them and I look at their face and I think, are they ready? Did they have every opportunity that they could have? Did we prepare them? Because these can't just be words, these are things that are influencing people's lives, and we just got a big dose of that with graduation. So it was good timing. We still have our core values that remain the same, with our focus on students, making sure that all students have opportunities to learn rich curriculum in inclusive classrooms. We're focused on learning to continue growing as an organization. Everyone must have access to learning opportunities that encourage ongoing growth and development. And that's learning for students as well as learning for adults. We all have to continue growing. Focusing on our connections to engage our community. Our district has to be focused on strong partnerships, outstanding service, and clear communication. And we're focused on our results. To be the best school district in the world, we're committed to high-quality implementation of practices that produce positive change and sustainable transformation. Those things that make a lasting impact on our district, not just for the short term. We have a lot of things that come and go in education, and so we want to be focused on the things that we know matter most, that are research-based, that are things that are high impact and sustainable. So when we look at that theme, like I said, we want to elevate our purpose. We have to be about making sure every child is successful. We are here to educate children. And then to do that, we have to elevate our practice. Everybody getting better at whatever their unique role is in our district every single day, and providing the supports that we need to do that. I was just making a few notes for my superintendent report, and one of the things that Matt talked about was the training that supports all of these initiatives. One of our realities is becoming that we don't fit in this building and in the spaces that we have had traditionally for training. We are kind of beginning to outgrow our capacity, and so we're looking even at auxiliary spaces to do that. And so as we think about all the ways we support learning and support those people who provide great service, we have to also start thinking ahead on where and how we do that. We want to elevate success, well-being, engagement, excellence, equity, and innovation. Those are the pillars, if you will, of why we're putting things into place. Success, of course, is all about high expectations and the supports to help students and staff grow every year. Well-being, you just heard a lot from Matt about creating safe, welcoming, and inclusive places to learn for students and staff. That directly relates to some of the pieces that you'll see on the retention of staff and how we make people feel welcome and how we're supporting them in their personal growth. Engagement is engaging students, families, and community partners to improve student outcomes and build trust. Elevating excellence to make sure that we're organizationally responsible through how we use our resources and the systems that provide the things that we do every day, and aligning those with our district values and our strategic priorities. Our equity work continues with increasing equitable outcomes. We have to be continuing our work around addressing barriers of multiple kinds to students who may not feel fully engaged and therefore are not as successful as they can be, and doing that for the adults that we work with as well. Innovation is also a thread that has to run through everything that we're doing. We want to be open to new ideas that embrace creativity and reimagine teaching and learning. We have a lot of great programs, and we have room for even more through partnerships, through how we create opportunities for students, technology, everything that we have the world at our feet to continue exploring new opportunities for innovation. So that leads us to the goals that will be part of our strategic plan next year. Academic achievement is believing that every student can learn and achieve at high levels, and that it is our responsibility to help each student learn, grow, and be challenged. Our commitment to success for every student is rooted in the ideals of opportunity, equity, and inclusion. So the big areas of focus within that strategic planning goal will be inclusive early learning, expanding those programs, culturally responsive teaching that we want infused into every classroom, systems of academic support to help students who might be struggling as well as those who are excelling, career and tech ed pathways. You saw a presentation on that a couple weeks ago with Dr. Pierce. Instructional technology and increasing our capacity there, and innovative learning opportunities. Our next strategic goal is designed to promote well-being of our staff and students. We believe that all students must be safe and feel a sense of belonging if they are to succeed. It's our responsibility to create safe and inclusive learning communities in each school where each student and family is valued and welcomed. So the big areas of work will be continuing our work with our school equity teams and how that continues to grow in our schools, our systems of behavioral, social, and emotional support, our security and emergency preparedness. It's not just about adding cameras, but it's also in the layers of the work we do with our people, making sure that we are prepared and able to handle things like unexpected evacuations that happened in the middle of graduation at one of our schools last week, and all kinds of other things that may occur. Cyber safety, really making sure that we are being diligent in our ability to protect student data, to protect our systems. We know that that's an ever-increasing threat for organizations, and continuing to look at our activities and athletics to make sure students have great opportunities. Our strategic goal around community engagement is undergirded with a belief that strong communities build strong schools, and strong schools build strong communities. Without our strong community engagement, we can't achieve our goals. We have to have our communities engaged with the work of our schools. So again, focusing on the work of our district equity teams and what that looks like in terms of our community engagement, cultural conversations, looking at our demographics, how are we meeting the needs of unique groups of people in our district, culturally responsive family engagement, needing to focus more on our ability to do interpreting and written interpretations more effectively, and then family and community feedback processes. We have some ways that we're looking to raise our level of responsiveness, get feedback, have good dialogue, and really find out what it is that we can do to support our families and our communities. Strategic goal of excellent staff. We believe that each employee in our school district plays a vital role in contributing to the success of our students. We value all the professionals within our organization and are committed to ensuring that we support and develop a high quality and diverse workforce. So we're actively focusing on strategies that we hope will contribute to that workforce diversity. Then once we have great people, we want to be able to retain them and support them in their professional role with high quality professional learning. This is a lofty goal in and of itself, and as I've talked with some of my colleagues recently, this is something that districts all over are looking at. What are the best strategies to do this? And some of this work is in how we're engaging our existing employees and our students, knowing that that's some of the best work we can do to have people go and get training and come back to us and be part of us. The other big challenge of this, of course, is affordable housing and making sure that people can come and stay in our district. Effective use of resources is our final goal area. We believe that using our resources responsibly and strategically will result in success for our students. As a publicly funded organization, we must be efficient and effective in our use of public resources to ensure and maintain trust. And of course, that has to do with our facilities as we move into this fall and continue to engage our community with what should the future look like in Lake Washington School District. With our facilities, we'll need some great people to help us with that work. And of course, our fiscal responsibility is how we're using the funds that we do have well to enhance opportunities for students and to continue working on providing the best opportunities that we can. So that is a very quick version of what we look forward to rolling out in a more detailed way next fall. We're very excited about it. We're already working on for our opening weeks and some ways that we're highlighting people along the way who helped us in how we became better at something in our own lives. And we think there's some fun stories to tell next year with students and staff and people in our district about ways that they have been impacted and now even impact others. So it's going to be a great strategic plan, and we're looking forward to next fall.
Thank you. Any questions? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It is an exciting time to have this all coming together. So looking forward to the finalizing and seeing how that goes out into the community and is able to have those discussions going forward. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I believe you are up yet again. The superintendent report is next.
Back to my other seat, just a couple of things, and I mentioned a few of them. One of the partners that we have in supporting student well-being next year is our foundation, and our foundation has just hired a new director. Her name is Helen Cernett, and so we are looking forward to welcoming her as a partner to our district, and we're grateful for those community organizations that have begun to really wrap around us. We can't do it alone as a school district, so I hope to have Helen come and introduce herself to the board early in the fall and then have some periodic updates around the work of the foundation. This is the time where it's wrapping up the school year. It's a sad time because we have some folks who will be leaving us, as well as excited for the new folks like Chris, who stayed through the whole meeting, who's joining us. And so I want to take just a moment and recognize Matt Montebianco as a member of our cabinet for his service, and I will miss him personally. It was almost exactly a year ago, I think tomorrow or the next day, that I met everyone for the first time and started to get to know people, and I'm so glad Matt was here for my first year. So Matt, congratulations and thank you. And congratulations, we replace one Matt with another. We look forward to Matt Gillingham taking his new role. So the good and the bad of this time of the year. Like I said, we are planning for August. People are busy all this week getting all kinds of professional development ready to go so that we have a great launch to the school year next year. And like I said, we are desperately looking at how we use space in this building because we are outgrowing it. As the district grows, everything grows, and as we're trying to do that good work, some days there just aren't enough places to do that during the school day. So keep your eyes peeled for any large rooms where 150 people will fit, because that's what I need for DLT. So we have just some really exciting things happening, and the more we have kind of continued to hook our resources with the work over the next 3 years, I think, you know, when I look at some of our data, like I've said before, there are districts in this country that would love to have the statistics that we do, but it's not good enough because we still have students who need supports. We still have students who are not achieving at the level that we want them to. And at the same time, we have so many things to celebrate. And so we are a district that is just poised to move forward to help all students grow and be the best that they can be. So with that, we are wrapping up the school year. We won't have a board meeting in July, so we'll be ready to hit the ground running in August with reasonable interpretations, waiting to come with our revised board policies.
All right, thank you. Eric, anything for legislative report?
Yeah, a quick plug. The WASDA Legislative Assembly is now open for registration. I'll be attending. Siri, I think you are attending. Some other districts had many of their board members. In fact, some may have had even all of their board members at it last year. And I think to the extent that other members are available and would like to attend, I think it would be very beneficial to have as many board members as possible. It is not at Bellevue. It is in beautiful Spokane, Friday the 27th through Saturday the 28th. It is not a huge time commitment. You could even fly in Friday morning and fly out Saturday afternoon. So it's not a multi-day commitment. And as far as these things go, it's actually kind of fun and worthwhile. So.
It is probably one of the, to see the issues throughout the state and the conversation that occurs. It is a pretty impressive move through all the positions and resolutions. So it gives you a good overview of the issues in education from a statewide perspective.
Yes, so beneficial to individual board members to attend. I think also beneficial to the district and the board as a whole to have our voice there through as many people as possible. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Any follow-up or future agenda items?
Thank you for fixing my problem with Power BI.
You're most welcome.
Glad to hear that was followed up on and taken care of so efficiently.
It might have been me.
With that, we will move on. Any other comments for this evening? Okay, our next board meeting will be held August 12th. It will be at 7 o'clock. There'll be a study session prior at 5. That is when we'll be holding the public hearing for the budget. That'll be followed by the August 26th with a study session also at 5 and a board meeting at 7. So I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director La Liberty that we adjourn. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.